My beloved child, something that was buried for far too long has finally begun to rise to the surface, and the most shocking part is not that a third party stood between you and your soulmate. It is the reason they worked so desperately to keep the two of you apart. There was a truth they knew, a truth they feared you would eventually discover, and once your soulmate began asking the right questions, the entire story they had carefully protected started falling apart. Don't skip, because what happened next changed the way your soulmate sees you, the third party, and every confusing moment that came before. For the longest time, you may have wondered why something that once felt so natural suddenly became complicated. One moment there was warmth, closeness, and an unspoken understanding between you and your person. Then something shifted. Messages became shorter. Silence became longer. Decisions stopped making sense. You could feel that something had entered the connection, but you could never see the complete picture. What you didn't know was that behind those quiet changes, someone else had been speaking. Someone had been influencing what your soulmate believed about you. But here is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. The third party wasn't simply trying to win your soulmate's attention. They were protecting a secret about themselves. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the detail that finally exposed everything came from a conversation the third party never believed your soulmate would hear about. Your soulmate had been carrying questions for months. Why did every warning about you sound strangely similar? Why did the third party become uncomfortable whenever your name appeared? Why did they always seem to have a new reason your soulmate should wait, hesitate, or move in another direction? At first, your person dismissed those questions. They thought perhaps they were overthinking everything. But one evening, something small happened. Someone who had remained quiet throughout the entire situation finally said a sentence that made your soulmate freeze: "You were never told the whole story." Those words were simple, but they opened a door that could no longer be closed. Suddenly your soulmate wanted details. Dates. Conversations. What had actually been said? Who started the rumors? And why had certain things been repeated as though they were facts when nobody could prove them? That was when the first contradiction appeared. The third party had once claimed that you had said something hurtful about your soulmate. But when your person asked where that information came from, there was no clear answer. Then another contradiction appeared. A story about your intentions had supposedly come from someone close to you, yet that person had never spoken those words. Your soulmate's heart began pounding, because they were realizing something enormous. Some of the distance between you had been created by information that may never have been true. Don't skip. This is where the long-buried truth begins to show itself. Your soulmate didn't immediately confront anyone. Instead, they became quiet. They started remembering old moments differently. Every time the third party had suddenly appeared after you and your person experienced a meaningful moment. Every warning that arrived just when your soulmate was considering reaching out to you. Every strange coincidence that had pulled them away just as they were beginning to trust what they felt. Separately, those moments seemed harmless. Together, they formed a pattern. And once your soulmate saw the pattern, they could not unsee it. If you have ever felt that there was more happening beneath the surface than you were being shown, comment the angel number 111 as a symbol of clarity and new understanding. Your soulmate then remembered one particular conversation. It had happened long ago, and at the time it seemed insignificant. The third party had asked them an unusual question: if you knew for certain that this person truly cared about you, would you still choose them? Your soulmate had laughed it off. But now the question felt completely different. Why would someone ask that unless they were afraid of the answer? Why would they need to know how strong your soulmate's feelings were? That memory became the thread that unraveled everything. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate began quietly revisiting the past, and what they discovered was not one dramatic act but dozens of tiny manipulations. Conversations shortened, meanings changed, information delivered without context, ordinary situations made to sound suspicious, and doubts introduced at exactly the moments when your connection was becoming stronger. Yet the greatest revelation had still not surfaced. The third party had not started interfering because they believed you were wrong for your soulmate. They began interfering because they realized something about your connection before your soulmate was willing to admit it. They saw how your person's energy changed when your name was mentioned. They noticed that no matter how much distance appeared, your soulmate continued comparing everything back to you. They saw that your person could be surrounded by people and still become unusually quiet whenever someone reminded them of you. And that frightened the third party, because they understood that they could influence circumstances, but they could not easily erase a genuine emotional bond. So they did what frightened people sometimes do: they tried to control the story. But stories built on half-truths eventually collapse under the weight of real questions. And those questions had finally begun. Your soulmate contacted someone who had witnessed more than anyone realized. They asked about one specific event, the moment that supposedly proved you had stopped caring. The answer stunned them. The event had happened, but the meaning had been completely reversed. What your soulmate had been told was rejection may actually have been hesitation, confusion, or an attempt to protect your own heart. The third party had taken an incomplete moment and presented it as a complete truth. That discovery shook your soulmate because suddenly the past was no longer fixed. Moments they had mourned began carrying different meanings. Silence they interpreted as indifference looked different. Distance they blamed entirely on you no longer seemed so simple. And then came the sentence that made everything stop. The person your soulmate was speaking with said, "There is something else you should know. The third party asked me not to tell you this." Your soulmate went completely still. Don't skip now. This is the point where everything your person thought they understood began changing. The hidden detail involved a message one your soulmate was apparently never supposed to know existed. Long ago, during one of the most confusing periods between you, something connected to you had reached the third party first. Perhaps it was a message, an explanation, a request to clear up a misunderstanding, or simply information showing that the situation wasn't what your soulmate had been led to believe. Whatever the exact form, the meaning was undeniable. There had been an opportunity for the truth to reach your person much earlier, and someone had chosen not to let that happen. Imagine what went through your soulmate's mind. How many months of uncertainty could have been different? How many decisions were made without the full story? How many nights did both of you sit separately wondering why the other person had changed? Your soulmate wasn't only surprised. They felt the emotional weight of understanding that some of their choices had been based on an incomplete picture. And this is important. The revelation didn't make them immediately rush toward anyone. It made them think deeply. carefully. They wanted to separate emotion from reality. They wanted to know exactly what was true before making another decision. For the first time, your soulmate stopped asking, "Why didn't this connection work?" and started asking, "Who benefited when we were apart?" That question changed everything. If you are still listening and you believe hidden truth eventually finds its way into the light, comment 222. Not as a prediction, but as your symbol that you choose clarity over confusion. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate's next discovery involved the third party's own words. There had been another private conversation, one they never expected to be repeated. During that conversation, the third party admitted something revealing. They had apparently noticed long ago that whenever your soulmate tried to completely move forward, something inside them pulled their thoughts back toward you. They were frustrated because your name continued resurfacing. Your memory stayed emotionally significant. Your soulmate could distract themselves, but they could not honestly say that everything connected to you had disappeared. That was the third party's real fear. Not simply losing attention. Losing control of the narrative. Because as long as your soulmate believed you didn't care, distance could survive. But if your soulmate discovered that you had also been confused, also been affected, also been receiving only pieces of the truth, then the entire barrier between you could begin to crumble. And now it was crumbling. Quietly. Piece by piece. The third party could feel the difference. Your soulmate stopped reacting to every warning. They stopped asking permission to trust their own feelings. They became more observant. When negative information about you appeared, instead of immediately believing it, they asked, "How do you know?" That single question became impossible to answer without exposing contradictions. Stay till the end, because the biggest truth isn't simply about what the third party did. It is about why your soulmate is suddenly looking at you differently. Your person began remembering the version of you they experienced directly, not the version described by other people. Your kindness in moments nobody witnessed. Your restraint when you could have caused unnecessary conflict. The way your presence made certain conversations feel easier. The way something about you remained familiar even through distance. Those memories became more powerful than second-hand opinions. And then your soulmate realized something almost painful in its simplicity. They had spent too much time listening to people describing your heart instead of remembering how your heart had actually felt to them. That realization created a shift. Not a dramatic public scene. Not a sudden argument. Something more meaningful. Your soulmate began reclaiming their own judgment. They began separating what they truly experienced from what they had been told to believe. And when that happened, the third party's influence weakened rapidly. If this message is bringing you peace or helping you reflect on your own situation, you can use Super Thanks to support the channel, and the Ko-Fi link is in the description box for anyone who wishes to support these soulmate messages and help keep this space going. There is never pressure, your presence here already matters. Now listen carefully, because there was still one question your soulmate could not answer. Why had the third party been so determined from the very beginning? The answer appeared when your soulmate uncovered something said much earlier than anyone realized. The third party had once described you in a completely different way before they became involved, before the warnings, before the distance. And what they said back then was surprisingly positive. They had noticed that you seemed important to your soulmate. They had even admitted that there was something unusually strong about the way your person responded to you. That meant the later negativity had not begun because they discovered something terrible about you. It began after they understood how significant you might become. That distinction changed everything. Your soulmate finally saw that the third party's behavior may have been rooted less in protecting them and more in protecting their own position. And when your person understood that, many old memories clicked into place at once. The sudden advice. The exaggerated concerns. The carefully timed interruptions. The constant suggestion that your soulmate should wait a little longer before talking to you. It all looked different now. Don't skip, because the final revelation of this part is the one that sets up what happens next. Your soulmate has now reached a point where knowing half the truth is no longer enough. They want the complete story. They are preparing to ask one direct question that the third party has avoided for a very long time. A question about the exact moment the interference began. A question connected to something your soulmate was told you had done. And somewhere inside, your person already suspects the answer will expose far more than one lie. The third party knows this question is coming. They can feel the shift. They can see your soulmate becoming less controllable, less easily persuaded, and more willing to follow facts wherever they lead. If you feel connected to this turning point, comment 333. And remember this, you do not have to chase truth when truth has already started moving toward the surface. Your soulmate is beginning to see that the distance between you may never have meant what they believed it meant. They are beginning to recognize that someone else's fear may have been disguised as advice. And they are beginning to understand that the connection they tried so hard to silence never disappeared, it simply became buried under confusion. Stay till the end of this story, because something huge is waiting for you. The next truth is connected to a conversation, one missing piece of evidence, and a sentence the third party never expected your soulmate to hear. And once that sentence is revealed, your person will finally understand why the third party was so desperate to keep you away. Something changed the moment your soulmate finally asked the question the third party had spent so long avoiding. Because this time your person was not asking from confusion, they were asking because they already knew enough to recognize when the answer did not fit. The room became strangely quiet. Your soulmate looked directly at them and asked, "When did you first decide that I should stay away from this person?" It sounded like a simple question, but the third party hesitated. Just for a second. Yet that second told your soulmate more than a long explanation ever could. Don't skip, because what happened after that hesitation is exactly where the buried truth began breaking apart. The third party tried to answer casually. They brought up an old incident, something your soulmate had heard many times before, claiming that this was the moment they realized you could not be trusted. But your person had already checked that story. They already knew the dates did not match. The third party had started interfering before that event ever happened. Your soulmate quietly asked another question. "But you were warning me about them weeks before that." Silence. There it was. The contradiction nobody had expected to be exposed so quickly. Your soulmate did not raise their voice. They didn't need to. The truth had begun doing the work for them. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the next detail made your soulmate realize that the entire separation between you may have started with one private conversation. The third party eventually admitted that something had happened earlier. They claimed someone had approached them with information about you. But when your soulmate asked who that person was, the explanation became vague. First it was someone close to the situation. Then it became someone who knew you. Then suddenly they could not remember exactly who had said what. Your person noticed every change. Months ago, they might have accepted it. Not anymore. Your soulmate was beginning to understand a powerful difference between truth and manipulation. Truth usually becomes clearer when questioned, while manipulation often becomes more complicated. And the third party's story was becoming more complicated by the minute. Your soulmate then asked the question that changed the energy completely: did you ever speak directly to them before deciding what they wanted? The answer was no. That one word hit your soulmate harder than they expected. The person who had influenced so many decisions about you had never even given you the chance to explain yourself. They had interpreted your intentions, judged your silence, described your feelings, and advised your soulmate about your heart without ever asking you what was actually happening inside it. If you believe clarity always exposes what confusion tried to hide, comment the angel number 444. Keep listening, because this story has not reached its most surprising turn yet. Your soulmate walked away from that conversation with more questions than answers, but something important had changed. They were no longer afraid of those questions. For a long time, finding out the complete truth felt dangerous because your person feared it might confirm that losing you was necessary. Now they feared something completely different, that they might discover losing you was never necessary at all. Later that night, your soulmate sat alone and reopened something they had avoided for months. It might have been an old conversation, saved messages, photographs, notes, or simply memories they had pushed away because remembering you hurt too much. But this time they were not looking through those moments with sadness. They were looking for inconsistencies. They began noticing things they had ignored. There was one period when you seemed ready to explain something. Your soulmate remembered wanting to hear you out, yet shortly afterward the third party appeared with urgent information that completely changed their mood. Another time, your person had almost contacted you, but someone convinced them that reaching out would only make things worse. Every time your soulmate approached clarity, fear appeared from somewhere else. That pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Don't skip now. The biggest revelation came when your soulmate remembered a message they once received indirectly. The third party had told them that you wanted distance, that you were moving forward, and that contacting you would only embarrass them. Your soulmate had believed it. Why wouldn't they? At the time, they assumed the third party knew something they didn't. But now your soulmate asked themselves a question they should have asked long ago: did I ever hear those words directly from them? No. They hadn't. And suddenly your person's memory returned to another detail. Around that same time, you had done something small that did not match the story they were being told. Maybe you looked back when you thought they were not watching. Maybe you left a message that seemed unfinished. Maybe someone mentioned that you still cared. Maybe your actions simply carried a softness that never matched the image of someone who had completely closed the door. Your soulmate had ignored those signs because the third party's explanation seemed more certain. Now certainty itself was what looked suspicious. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate decided to contact one person who had stayed outside the conflict. Someone neutral. Someone who had no reason to protect you or the third party. And when your soulmate asked them what they remembered, the answer changed everything. This person said there had been a day when the third party seemed unusually nervous after seeing something connected to you. They could not remember every detail, but they remembered one sentence clearly. The third party had said, "If they talk directly, everything is going to change." Your soulmate felt their stomach drop. Think about those words. Not, "If they talk, your soulmate will get hurt." Not, "If they talk, the truth will protect them." The fear was that if you and your soulmate spoke directly, everything would change. Why would direct communication be threatening unless someone benefited from the two of you staying confused? Stay till the end. Your soulmate kept asking questions. What were they afraid would change? The neutral person hesitated before saying something that made your person go completely still. Apparently, the third party had believed your soulmate was much more emotionally connected to you than they admitted. They had seen it early. Long before your soulmate confessed it even to themselves. They knew that if you were given one honest conversation without interference, without assumptions, without someone translating your words, the bond between you might become stronger rather than weaker. And from that moment, the third party's behavior began making sense. Their strategy had never depended on proving you were wrong. It depended on preventing you and your soulmate from comparing notes. That is why misunderstandings grew so easily. Each of you had pieces the other person never received. Your soulmate believed you had chosen distance. You may have believed your soulmate had stopped caring. One side saw silence and interpreted rejection. The other side saw withdrawal and interpreted indifference. Meanwhile, the person between you never had to invent an enormous story. They only had to keep both of you from discovering how incomplete your individual stories were. If this turning point resonates with you, comment 555 as a symbol of major change and emotional clarity. Don't skip, because this is where your soulmate discovered something even more unexpected. The third party had once tried to find out exactly what you knew. Your person learned about an old conversation where the third party casually asked someone whether you had spoken about certain events. At the time, nobody thought much about it. Now it looked completely different. They were not simply curious. They may have been checking whether their version of events was still safe. Your soulmate began feeling something they had not expected, not rage, but disappointment. Deep disappointment. Because this person had positioned themselves as someone who wanted the best for your soulmate. Your person had trusted their advice. They had made emotional decisions based on that trust. And now they were discovering that some of that advice may have been shaped by fear, jealousy, insecurity, or a desire to remain important. Yet your soulmate did something mature at this moment. They did not automatically assume every single thing the third party said was false. Instead, they decided to verify everything. That made the truth even harder to stop. Every fact that could be confirmed began separating itself from the stories that could not. And the pattern became clearer. Some misunderstandings were real. Some mistakes had happened naturally. Neither you nor your soulmate had handled every moment perfectly. But the third party had repeatedly taken normal confusion and pushed it toward permanent separation. Whenever something could have been resolved, they emphasized the worst interpretation. Whenever your soulmate missed you, they reminded them why they should stay away. Whenever your person questioned the distance, another frightening possibility was introduced. That realization hurt because your soulmate finally understood how easily fear had been used against feelings they were not ready to understand. Something huge is waiting for you. The next morning, your soulmate looked at their phone for a long time. Your name crossed their mind again and again. But this time the feeling was different. They were no longer thinking, "Why did this person hurt me?" They were thinking, "What if they never knew the story I was told?" That one question reopened a door inside them. Your soulmate started imagining your perspective for the first time without filtering it through someone else's interpretation. What if you thought they chose the third party over you? What if your silence was not rejection but self-protection? What if you stopped trying because every time you moved closer, your soulmate unexpectedly pulled away? What if both of you were responding to confusion created somewhere between you? For your soulmate, this was one of the most emotional realizations of the entire story. Because suddenly your past no longer looked like two people who simply stopped caring. It looked like two people who may have been reacting to different versions of the same situation. Stay till the end, because your soulmate then remembered something the third party once said that now sounded almost like a confession. During an argument months ago, they had told your person, "You always change when that person's name comes up." At the time it sounded like frustration. Now your soulmate understood what the sentence revealed. The third party had always known you mattered. They had always known your name carried emotional weight. They had always recognized that beneath every attempt to move forward, something unresolved remained. And perhaps that was exactly why they worked so hard to make sure resolution never happened. If you're still here, comment the angel number 777 to mark the moment when hidden pieces begin falling into place. Your soulmate soon learned that another person had tried to warn them months earlier, but the timing was wrong. This person had noticed the third party repeatedly speaking on your behalf without actually knowing what you were thinking. They wanted to say something, but they feared getting pulled into the drama, so they remained silent. Now, after seeing your soulmate searching for answers, they finally spoke. Their words were simple. "I always wondered why they were so certain about what you felt when they hardly knew you." Your soulmate had no answer. Because that was the question underneath everything. How did the third party always seem to know your motives? How could they confidently say you had moved on, stopped caring, changed your mind, or wanted distance when they were not having those conversations with you? The answer was becoming painfully clear. Much of what had been presented as information had really been interpretation. And interpretation had slowly become truth simply because it was repeated enough times. Don't skip. The most powerful shift was happening inside your soulmate now. Your person began trusting their own memories again. They remembered moments when you showed care without expecting anything back. Moments when you were patient despite confusion. Moments when you said less than you could have because you didn't want to create pressure. They remembered the way your connection felt before other voices became louder than their own intuition. And your soulmate asked themselves, "Why did I allow someone else's fear to become louder than my own experience?" That question hurt. But it also freed them. Because once they saw what happened, they could choose differently moving forward. This is the turning point the third party feared most. Not simply your soulmate discovering a secret. Your soulmate becoming emotionally independent. Because someone who can think for themselves cannot be controlled by endless warnings. Someone who asks direct questions cannot easily be trapped inside second-hand stories. Someone willing to hear both sides becomes much harder to separate from the truth. And that is exactly who your soulmate is becoming. If these messages bring you comfort, reflection, or hope, you can use Super Thanks if you wish to support the channel. The Ko-Fi link is also in the description box for anyone who wants to support these soulmate messages and help this space continue. Your support is appreciated, but simply being here and listening matters too. Now pay attention, because the long-buried truth was about to become even more personal. Your soulmate discovered that the third party had kept one particular detail hidden not because it made you look bad but because it made you look genuine. There had been a moment when you had apparently defended your soulmate even while you were hurt. Someone had criticized your person, perhaps assuming you would agree because of the distance between you. But instead, you refused to speak badly about them. You protected their dignity when they were not there to hear it. That story had eventually reached the third party. Yet your soulmate had never been told. Imagine what that meant to your person. While they were being encouraged to believe you no longer cared, there was evidence that even during separation you still respected them. Why hide something like that? Your soulmate knew the answer before anyone said it. Because it contradicted the entire picture they had been shown. If your soulmate knew you still cared enough to protect their name when they weren't present, they might begin questioning everything else. And now they were. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate finally reached the point where avoiding the final conversation was impossible. They contacted the third party again. This time there was no vague opening, no emotional argument, no opportunity to change subjects. Your person asked directly, "Why didn't you tell me they defended me?" The third party froze. They asked who had said that. Your soulmate did not answer. Instead, they repeated the question. "Why didn't you tell me?" The response came slowly, "I didn't think it mattered." Those 5 words changed everything. Your soulmate felt an almost unbelievable clarity. Of course it mattered. Every negative detail had mattered enough to be repeated immediately. Every suspicious interpretation had mattered enough to influence decisions. Every reason to stay away had mattered. But evidence that showed your heart differently somehow didn't matter. That imbalance revealed more than any confession could have. Your soulmate finally saw the filter through which information about you had been passing. Anything that encouraged distance was amplified. Anything that encouraged understanding disappeared. And once your soulmate recognized the filter, its power vanished. Comment 888 if you believe what is hidden cannot stay hidden forever. Stay till the end, because this conversation wasn't over. Your soulmate asked one final question: "Was there anything else you didn't tell me because you thought it didn't matter?" The third party said nothing. And that silence was enormous. Your soulmate knew there was more. They could feel it. Not mystical certainty, but the simple human instinct that appears when someone's answer never arrives. The third party looked away. Their confidence disappeared. The person who had always seemed to have an explanation suddenly had none. Your soulmate left with one decision: they would uncover the rest without relying on the third party to give it willingly. They would speak to people directly. They would revisit conversations. They would stop accepting assumptions as evidence. And eventually, if the moment felt right, they would want to hear your side, not someone else's version of your side, but yours. Directly. That possibility is what the third party had feared from the beginning. Because one honest conversation could do what months of interference were designed to prevent: allow two people to finally realize they had been carrying different versions of the same story. Don't skip the next part, because something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate is about to uncover the detail the third party refused to admit, the one piece of information they deliberately kept hidden because they knew it could have brought you and your person back into communication much sooner. And when your soulmate finds out exactly what was withheld, they won't only understand why the third party kept you apart. They will understand the exact moment the entire situation was secretly redirected and why your name was at the center of it all.